What's up, y'all? SloMo is back, slapping you with another video. Today we're going to talk about something a bit different than what we've previously done. I'm not going to discuss the new indie title I think you guys need to check out. I'm not going to give you my impressions on the latest game I played. Let's talk about something we've all asked ourselves at some point while playing a video game. What is up with this hair? Now, hair in the early generations of video games was as much as an afterthought as a character's clothes or face. The visuals were so basic that we didn't care that any of it wasn't close to being realistic. We couldn't even fathom realistic visuals at that time, but now, for the past decade, we've seen major advancements in graphical fidelity. We've seen games which tout photorealistic visuals of skin, facial expressions, the clothing of our characters wear, etc. But we don't consistently get good hair on these characters, and even less so for the hair of black people. And instead of me just telling you how bad the hair in these games are, how about I show you? So here is Rise of the Tomb Raider, developed by Crystal Dynamics, and I think Crystal Dynamics did an excellent job with the environments, the clothing, Laura's body language, animation, facial expressions, all that great stuff. I mean, look right here with the leather of her coat. You can see how it's worn in some places and how it's a used coat. Like, that level of detail is amazing, but then you see the hair. The hair doesn't match the level of detail we see everywhere else. It looks plastically, it looks out of place, too shiny. Look here how you can just tell it's so different. And I think the biggest problem when you see hair like this with even AAA games is that it kind of takes you out of the immersion of everything. Look at this other character who also has a lot of detail in her face, but then the hair doesn't really match the level of detail that is occurring everywhere else. Here's one where I'm confused on why the developer even decided to have a character creator in the first place. And this is The Ascent that came out last year, and a pretty decent top-down twin-stick shooter of a game, but the character creator definitely never got any kind of accolades whatsoever. Here's a character creator that essentially, if you're looking for black hairstyles, you're looking at a couple of options, and it's bald or dreads. That's it. That's all you got. It kind of makes me wonder if these developers have ever met any actual black people. Like, have you seen black people before? Do you know that we have more than just two hairstyles? So this is actually from The Division, developed by Ubisoft and Massive Entertainment. They actually didn't do that bad with this game. It's terrible in a lot of cases. Man, look at that. What kind of hairstyle is that? What is going on here? This is not a ton of options here, especially not for people with different grains of hair. Although you will see here that this is an attempt to actually deliver on a particular hairstyle that isn't mostly seen. Of course, they got the cornrows as usual. There's still the bald head look if you want to go that route, but at least they attempted something different here, which is often not the case. Oh man, look at that. Can we get a shape up? Can we get the boy shape up? Final Fantasy VII Remake. I could get into how the character Barrett does not have your typical grain of hair that you expect from a black male, but let's not get into that. Let's look at the level of detail they put into the main character's Tifa, who hair looks great. And even Cloud with his very weird hair that when we first saw back in the 90s, thought his hair was impossible. They seem to actually make it work. Versus this character, and yes, she's an NPC, but look at her hair. Come on, man. The level of detail is not the same. I understand she is an NPC, but then again, when you look at Barrett, look at Barrett here. Look at Barrett's hair. How is that fade? Look at Tifa's hair. Then look at Barrett. The level of detail, the attempt to make it work is just not there. This is Dragon Age Origins. And I mean, yeah, the game's a little old, but I do want to kind of show you guys some of how this stuff has always been. So Hair looks somewhat plasticky. You got a lot of various hairstyles for a certain kind of texture of hair. We got the cornrows, and we got the bald head. That's about it. Oh, and the buzz cut, right? So like, it's always that with a lot of these games with hair. It's a ton of different hairstyles for a certain texture of hair, and if you don't have that texture of hair, you get cornrows, you get a bald head, you get a buzz cut. I really want to take a look at Dragon Age Inquisition real quick, because not only are the hair in Dragon Age Inquisition nowhere near the same quality as the rest of the parts of the character customization menu, and I mean the ability to change the bone structure of your character's face, the eye color, the detail in the eyes, the kind of eyes, the multitude of different customization options that had this character creator actually receive a lot of credit for being way more robust and better than what you would see from other character creators at games of that time. Dragon Age Inquisition came out in 2014, that's 8 years ago. And what you will see is that even though it came out 8 years ago, hair in video games has not evolved much since then. But outside of it just being subpar hair, you're going to see the limited options that we have here with the kind of hair. So here we are in the hair menu, and you're going to notice that every hair option is the same grain of hair. Every one, including some really awful hair that you would just be like, well, why would I ever want that, right? But just look at it. Look at the choices that you have. They're pretty limited, and they all tend to veer towards a particular kind of hair grain that isn't representative of everybody. This is Mass Effect Andromeda. This came out in March of 2017. This is 3 years after Dragon Age Inquisition. Now tell me, do you see any improvement in the character creator? Any improvement in the hair? Actually, I would say it's a downgrade from Inquisition, because at least with Inquisition you had more options for other aspects of the face. The hair though, the hair is even worse. Correction, not just worse, it's worse in detail, but you do see some movement in the hair, whereas in Inquisition the hair was like a helmet. It didn't move, no individual strands whatsoever, whereas you can see slight movement with the hair here in this character creator. And here we are with hairstyles, and you know, pretty limited in regards to different styles, representation for different grains of hair. This one hairstyle here is represented all throughout the game. I am playing Andromeda. I saw this one hairstyle at least 24 times on various NPCs. What is that? It's like a chia pet. This is supposed to be an afro. This looks like cotton candy, like black cotton candy stuck on a bald head. That's awful. All right, let's see what we got here with Elden Ring. Look at the different hair types. Let's just go through this real quick. Of course, you got bald head, and you got basically skinhead, a little bit hair there. This isn't that bad as far as that kind of grain of hair. But then, like, okay, so that's just like a little bit more than that. It's just basically, you literally just gave 4 versions of the same haircut, just at different lengths right here, right? Different hair, really just all the same grain of hair here, right? Whoa, okay. Yep, male pattern, baldness happening right there. Got the women haircuts in here, and then wait a minute, is that it? Did I miss something? Where is the... Oh. So I guess this is supposed to be kinky hair. I mean, let's zoom in on this real quick. I've seen this multiple times with some developers where it's just like, this doesn't work. Like, what kind of hairstyle is this? It reminds me of a Brillo pad. That's what it looks like, a Brillo pad. And so, if you want, you know, different kinds of hair, it isn't the typical grain of hair that they tend to only think about. You've got this, and straight bald. But why is this the case? Why is hair in video games so difficult to master, and why is it that in particular black hair in video games often look worse than other grains of hair? Well, I've been doing some research on the answers to both of those questions, and I'll attempt to explain why hair has not kept up with the advancements in visuals that we see in other aspects, why games have actually been designed this way for years, and why black hair in particular has looked worse than others, and why, you know, we may actually be seeing a drastic change in the near future. So let's start with why hair has not kept up with other graphical evolutions in gaming. Now, we've all played games that made you stand in awe of the environment, giving you photorealistic images of clothing, so much so that it has inspired cosplay. But why not the hair? Believe it or not all games are developed by simply one developer. They are often helped by support studios, co-development teams, and it isn't unusual that a lead developer would outsource the work of the hair to a completely different company. Now sure, the biggest studios with the biggest budgets may do it all in-house, they may do it all themselves, but it's common to outsource. The results of these efforts can vary greatly. We're all familiar with the hilariously bad facial animations from Mass Effect Andromeda. Those turned out to be outsourced. Likewise, we've experienced huge AAA games like The Division have their character hair outsourced, and I mean, look at this is the end result of that. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking what I'm thinking. Why did you outsource this work for such a terrible result? Well, the answer probably isn't going to make you feel much better about it. It takes a long time to get realistic hair, with excellent implementations for hair done in games taking up to 2 years to perfect. Often, these lead development teams simply don't have the bandwidth to do it themselves or the talent, nor can they get any of that done with some of the deadlines that they have. Now, before a developer even begins work on the hair of their characters, 2 things need to be determined. 1, what the hair is supposed to look like, and 2, what is your polygon budget allowed for hair? Because you can't determine how realistic you can make the hair look if you don't even know what it's supposed to look like. And since we have roughly 100,000 individual hairs on our heads, trying to be as realistic as possible could cripple the performance of games on older hardware. So the first thing they do is take reference images, whether they be pictures from an actual real life model or an artist rendition. The goal is to make sure that they know they can nail the look before they even get started, and then also attempt to replicate that look as best as they possibly can. Actually, let me show you what 3D artist and animator Ades Osakingate says about how she prepares to animate hair in a game.
My next step was to get her back in and take new reference photos of her with ponytail in her hair. These are the photos, and I use them to match her hair like perfectly when I start placing it onto the model. So when I have like a rough idea of what I'm going to do with her, I get her in a third time and I take reference photos like of her actual hair, like just a white blank piece of paper, and I layer her hair on top of it just to get like the texture. So I whip up this sort of board which gives me an idea of what my texture card will look like. And we need like thick chunks, and we need flyaways, and we need like different sort of like root materials and stuff. And when I have this down, I take it into Maya and I create an XGen description. Like, XGen is, it makes realistic looking hair, but the problem with XGen is that you get individual hairs, like pieces, like strands of hair. That's way too expensive for like Unreal and game engines. So what I need to do is create my hair in XGen and then bake it down, and this geometry I bake into textures and texture cards. The way to place hairs, there's no like magic generation type of thing going on here. You just need to place it by hand and bend it, and yeah, that's the only way to make it look really good.
As Ida said, you can't make hair in games photorealistic because most game engines today are not capable of handling it. And this is why a polygon budget is set with the intent of making the hair look good enough without hindering the rest of the visual presentation or performance. But if the polygon budget is too limited, then the end result could be what we've often seen from many games, even massive AAA endeavors. So what exactly is the current development process of creating hair, and how does it go so wrong? Well, after the references have been completed and the budget is determined, an animator would then start creating hair cards. Hair cards are like a thin layer that can be molded to fit over a character's head. The point of hair cards is to give the player the impression that each strand of hair has been individually rendered when it hasn't, without the game actually having to run it with individual strands of hair. Multiple hair cards are deployed to create hair for a character, and there are different kinds of hair cards. They typically come in 4 types. There is the base hair cards, structural hair cards, breakup hair cards, and flyaway cards. An animator will use software like ZBrush or Maya to create the hair for their characters. But let's go over the differences between the 4 types of hair cards. The first thing you need are base hair cards, and they are the largest layer that will cover a character's head. They are also at the bottom and therefore do not need a ton of detail. Second would be structural hair cards, which are placed on top of the base hair cards. The density of the hair is less than the base hair cards, but here is where you'll get the volume of the hair and the style, however it shall be defined. And then after that has been completed, you'll get your breakup hair cards, which are added on top of the structural hair cards to balance out the structural and base cards, because without the breakup hair cards, you start to see the process of how it was created and it doesn't look natural. So breakup hair cards are basically a way of filling in the gaps to make the hair look more realistic. And then finally, flyaway cards, which are smaller clumps of hair to make sure the hair doesn't look too perfect. Because if it looks too perfect, then it's not realistic. Flyaway cards help with that. Now, what other aspects of making good hair in a video game look realistic is the lighting. Lighting is very, very important. Specularity, for example, is a procedure used to help your eyes determine what you're seeing as hair. It's really important when it comes to dark colored hair. Specular highlights are added to the hair to help the game's in-engine lighting bounce off the hair and give it a realistic look. The problem is each step varies in importance when it comes to developing different kinds of hair, especially hair for black people. Hair for black people requires more details, which means it could require a larger polygon budget. And a larger polygon budget for some of these developers who may not find accuracy towards certain types of hair to be high on their list of priorities seems to be not worth their time. Developers also felt that they needed these trade-offs with hair in order to achieve amazing environments. All of them combined with a skilled enough creator and a generous polygon budget will provide realistic looking hair even on outdated limited hardware like the last generation consoles or older PCs. As the software the developers use begins to advance, so does the hardware they are putting their games on. Now, for current generation consoles and mid to high-end PCs, developers are now able to render individual strands of hair without tanking the performance of their games, making it easier to do textured hair that resembles black people's hair with no compromises. For example, in Spider-Man Miles Morales, Insomniac Games used the more traditional approach using hair cards for Miles' hair on the PlayStation 4 version. It really is an extension of his head with the typical hair card format in use. But in the PlayStation 5 version, Insomniac was able to procedurally generate thousands of pieces of geometry. Insomniac's method actually allows them to dynamically determine how many strands of hair need to be rendered, determined by how close or how far away the character is from the screen. The closer the character, the more hair they generate. This process is extremely unique and could be picked up by more developers as they are making more games on more advanced hardware. Software like Eevee, Smart Hair, Frostbite 3.0, and MetaHuman for Unreal Engine 5 could be huge in allowing game hair to be on par with the rest of the visual package. I actually had the opportunity to test out a beta build of the metahuman technology. Now, I have zero experience in making anything like this whatsoever, but within just a few minutes, I become familiar with the tools at my disposal and began modifying models with hair that looked real. And yes, the options for black hair were limited here, as they usually are, but this was just the beta, and actual developers whose jobs are to make this should have zero excuses for not matching this level of quality. So let me end this by stating that I am officially putting these developers on notice. When it comes to games being developed and have yet to be released, there is zero excuse to have subpar and downright hideous implementations of hair in video games any longer, and especially no excuse for the lack of attention, the lack of time spent in implementing textured hair just as much as you spend time on other grains of hair. These excuses are no longer valid in 2022. You have the tools, you have the hardware, and you have the software to allow you to create great hair in video games and have that hair be just as realistic looking as the rest of your environments, their character models, their facial expressions, and their clothing. So do it right, or we're gonna have to call you out. Now, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content that seeks to educate and inform, consider hitting the like button and the subscribe button. It'll be much appreciated. But you guys take care, and I'll see you next time. Peace.